Nature provides us with everything that we need to stay healthy and vibrant, and one of the most amazing but overlooked things is sound. Everything vibrates. Some frequencies are healthy and some are not. Today I'm chatting with Justin Handley, half of the dynamic duo that is Silvermouse. Together, they create psychoactive music that can put you into altered states and make you feel just great. How? I had that question too, and I can't wait to hear his story. So I'm Laura Giles, your host of Modern Animism Radio. The show is free to listen to, but not to produce. So if you're a fan and you'd like to support, please comment, share, review, or donate at buymeacoffee.com/ it's not you, it's me to help us to continue to create inspiring and educational content. Thanks. In the spirit of gratitude and reciprocity, I'd like to give back to the elements that give us life. Acknowledge the element of earth. Thank you for the ground beneath our feet, the fertile land that gives us food, our healthy bodies, qualities like tenacity, beauty, and abundance that support our life here in the physical. Acknowledge the element of air and give gratitude for the air that we breathe, ideas, creativity, inspiration, and communication. I acknowledge the element of fire and give gratitude for the passion, responsibility, will, warmth, and transformative energy that makes life possible and fun. I acknowledge the element of water and give gratitude for the example to flow with whatever life brings and be resilient, and for your nurturing, receptive, and deep energy. Thank you. I acknowledge the plant, animal, mineral, and ancestral and spirit realms. You complete me, and I'm grateful for you. Now, let's talk with Justin Handley.
Hi, Justin. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I can't wait to talk about your music, but you have a partner. Can we start by talking about how you and your partner got together to create Silvermouse?
Sure. Well, it's a deep partnership. We're married. We have 2 kids. Um, it's so we are kind of life partners more than just band partners.
Mhm.
But we met. Actually, I was working in an experimental theater. I had just left the theater, kind of trying to work towards pursuing music as a career more than being a musician in theater. And I was still teaching music at the theater, though I was the musical director there. And she came we used to hold these kind of multi-month internship training programs um, for people looking into ensemble physical theater. And she came to one of those. And yeah, it all sort of evolved from there. And we kind of traveled around, got to know each other, ended up in Los Angeles, got married, ended up back in New Mexico. And it wasn't until then that we actually started playing music together.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I mean, and interestingly, Joe's history, she wasn't a musician. She never played music. She didn't have anything to do with music. Uh, but she sort of had music in her head. And at some point I was like, well, you can there's electronic music and you can kind of get the concept out there, maybe a little more easily than say learning to play violin.
Mm.
You can move from thought to something that sounds like what you're thinking a little quickly. And, yeah. And so she picked that up and started playing around, and maybe about a year or two later, we put out our first album, and it's been going since then. And so that was in
That's pretty wild.
2008. So we've been doing this now for about 15 years.
And how did you introduce the hemisync into the Monroe Institute, all of that stuff into the music?
That started about 4 years ago. Interestingly, when I first met Joe, I had a tape from the Monroe Institute that I didn't even know that it was from the Monroe Institute. It was just some tape, and somebody was like, "You should listen to this," and I did, and it kind of blew my mind in terms of the world that it opened up inside your brain just listening to this one tape. And so then I was obsessed with it when I was in my kind of early 20s, mid 20s. I would play it for everyone I met. I'd be like, lie down and listen to this, and then we'll talk. and and I did that to Joe. Like in the first couple of days that we met, I was like, "You have to listen to this tape. It's amazing." And and then we moved. It got put in storage. I didn't think about it for a lot of years, and then when COVID started, I work as a programmer. Support the music, which doesn't always pay the bills,
Yeah.
and I got a job just through a temp agency to build a mobile app, and after I got the job, I was talking to them about who they were and what they did, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, you made the tape," and so it was kind of a big full circle for me. But once we started working with them, it went pretty quickly. I mean, the idea came up, well, why isn't anyone doing this in live music? Is it possible to do this in live music? And we worked with the signals. Somewhere about a year in, I actually decided that I wanted to work in the music instead of programming. And I spent a year doing music production and learning how to generate the signals and kind of doing a deep dive there. After which I went back to programming because I learned that I love playing music, but I actually don't enjoy being a music engineer. Especially for something that's, I don't want to say uncreative, but that's fundamentally uncreative. Like putting together meditations is hard work. It's all about how loud is the voice? Can you hear it? What's the background music like? Is it disruptive? It's just a very technical process. And I think that for me, I learned that I prefer to separate the sort of fun, creative side of music from my work.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
So, if
So
somebody's listening and they don't know what Monroe Institute is, can you give us a little update on that?
sure. So the Monroe Institute was started by Bob Monroe. It was I think in the 70s, it sort of is when it started out. He was let me get this right, vice president at NBC. He owned some radio stations in New
I
York
didn't know
City.
that.
He was a big radio station magnate, basically. And he was doing research into sleep learning and to see if we could, get the matrix working where like you just go to bed and stick some headphones on and wake up and you can like speak Japanese or something. um, and one of the ways that he was looking into doing that was through binaural beats and brainwave entrainment to try to induce what has become a signature kind of state for the Monroe Institute, which is mind awake, body asleep.
Hmm.
Right. So could you let the body rest while keeping the mind engaged? And somewhere in doing the research and listening to his own, work and trying to figure out what would work and what wouldn't, he had an out of body experience and found himself kind of floating above the bed, looking down at himself, a very traditional, you know, out of body astral projection kind of experience. And he was not a mystical guy. He was pretty straight, I guess you would say. So, it kind of blew his mind. I think that he was between fear and like, am I insane? Was that real? What just happened? And so he actually founded the Monroe Institute to look into that question, which is what is, the relationship of consciousness to the physical body and how do they relate? And he spent, the rest of his life really kind of deep diving into those questions. And so the Monroe Institute is now a legacy. He died, and after
Hmm.
that, it's gone on to carry on the work. So there's a research side that still looks into both sound signals and how we can continue improving that, but also does research in other areas of consciousness and really consider themselves a consciousness research institute, and also primarily run a retreat center where they we bring people and we do week-long sessions and kind of deep dives into different states of consciousness induced by uh, brainwave entrainment and sound.
And so, what I'm understanding you to say is that you have married this technology to your music.
Yes, so we use a slight variation. Well, it depends. The Monroe Institute, what they call Monroe Sound Science, is a very diverse set of technologies. It's actually probably like 8 or 9 different ways that you can induce brainwave entrainment. Some of them don't work. One of the most popular, binaural beats, which is what everyone knows about, and there's like huge amounts of binaural beats audio on Spotify and YouTube. It's kind of out there. but it's a headphone specific technology. It requires stereo isolation where each ear has to hear a different thing. And you can't do that in live music.
Right.
And so we had to work through the signals for a while. We actually tried at our very first show. We did turn on binaural beats for a minute, and it was pretty interesting, but I think inconsistent. If you walked around the space, there were some places in the room where it would be very intense and some places where you couldn't hear it at all because of the way the sound waves were canceling out from speakers. And so we played around with different entrainment technologies until we came up with one that seemed to consistently, have full room coverage from stereo speakers and speakers in different positions, and started using that in live shows. And the first couple we did, we called signal tests, and we had people sign off on waivers, and we did entry and exit surveys and really tried to
Wow.
approach it pretty technically to make sure that everything was good. I think one of the big concerns with this is epilepsy. Same as strobing lights. There is a possibility, I think, that with sound, it is much smaller. Like light is it's a more effective entrainment technique. A lot of people don't use it because it's also more abrasive. It's way more dominating than just sound. Like being able to listen to music is, I think, an easier avenue, but light entrainment is scientifically measured a stronger form of brainwave entrainment than sound. And we ran about 3 or 4 shows like that and felt very safe with it. And so then started just bringing it into our normal performance routine. And now it's been about 4 years, and every show we've played and all the albums we're releasing are backed by Monroe Sound Science. And it's a pretty cool effect. I mean, I think that it varies depending on what signals you play, but the predominant thing that we notice as musicians is that it changed the conversation a little bit. So let's say you play a show and somebody comes up to you afterwards and they're like, "Oh, I love your music," right? Or they walk out the door because they don't want to say to you, "Oh, I hate your music." But when we started introducing the signals, the conversation about the music actually died out. And people would come up after shows and say things more like, "Oh, I felt this," or, "Oh man, I was really like that made me cry in this part," or, "Oh, there was this thing that was," and it became more about their experience and their feelings. And I think that having, especially some of the lower sort of meditative signals, music has a long history with drugs and alcohol. I mean, in the United States, the music industry is so deeply tied to the alcohol industry that most musicians, if you really look at it, are alcohol salesmen when you're playing live. Like that is how you are getting paid. And we try to play, we tend to not play places that serve alcohol. Like we don't have a no alcohol rule. We often play places where it's like, bring whatever you want, but we tend to not play in bars and traditional venues like that. And I think one of the nice things about the signals is it provides a similar effect where it brings you to a calm place. It sort of disarms the same thing that somebody might have a drink to, just like you're in a big crowd of people. Maybe you're not comfortable. You don't know the people. It's like, how do you take the edge off of that experience? And I think that the sound signals sort of provide a similar thing where it takes the edge off. It lets people feel more comfortable in themselves and in the place and just immerse into the music a little faster, but also without having, I guess, the negative side effects of
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. I have so many questions, but before I get to them, I don't want to forget to ask you. So you said brain entrainment a few times. For people who don't know what that is, can you explain that?
Sure. So brainwave entrainment is an effect where your brain will start to synchronize to the predominant beat frequency in an environment. And so a brainwave, first of all, is when enough neurons are firing in a pattern that you can measure it electrically, right? So you've got like billions of neurons. It's very random. What goes on in your brain is chaotic, but there are patterns, and groups of neurons will start firing together, often in sort of rhythmic patterns. And that can be measured in beat frequency. Like in music, it would be called beats per minute. In brain science, they measure it in hertz, which is beats per second. So, most music operates at around 120 BPM, beats per minute. like somewhere in that range. It goes down to 60, maybe it goes up to 200 something, depending on the music you're listening to, but it's all in that range. And all of those beats per minute fall in the 2 to 4 hertz range, which is 2 to 4 beats per second. So that alone is a very fundamental thing, which is, I think, why music has an effect no matter what. I think that anytime you've got that bass drum going at a consistent rate, there is some brainwave entrainment effect. And the 2 to 4 hertz range is very low. That's like sleep. And I think that that's how music can create sort of a dissociative effect, is that your brain is being brought to this place of sleep, but you're not going to sleep. You're in a public space. It's loud. You're not going to fall asleep. And there's a lot more variables going on, but it kind of has an effect on how you feel and how you're feeling. That can be manipulated with sound, with light, with electricity, with anything that you can pulse at a consistent rate. So like medically, if they want to do brainwave entrainment for like real brain medicine, they'll typically use electricity and hook up electrodes to your head and do like low level pulses. That's a super effective technique. It's also quite invasive. There's light therapy, which is basically strobe lights, and that works with your eyes picking up a flash. And I've read the research pretty deeply. I actually haven't found anyone that explains how it works. Like, you can show that it does work, but how do you know that? How does it work? And I think that the way it works is very simple, which is that your eyes or your ears or your body, because you can even do it like the tapping thing, which became very popular, same thing. So what's happening is now my body's saying, I feel a thing, I feel a thing, I feel a thing. And so that message that's going to my brain has a frequency. And then other electrons pick it up and start to kind of vibe in time with that frequency. And you can achieve an effect where the brain starts to synchronize to that. And then if you look at how the brain works, different frequencies associate to different things. So starting low, like 0 to 4 hertz is kind of sleep. 4 to 8 hertz would be deep meditation. 8 to 13 hertz is kind of just relaxation. 13 up to about 30 is where we operate every day, just normal daily operation. And above 30 hertz is called gamma, and that gets into things like hyperfocus. It can also be anxiety. It can be, just the really high end thing. It also is ecstatic experience. And so you can then play frequencies like that and impact the brain state. And specific is a hard word in certain ways. It's not a precise science. If I play you a 4 hertz beat, your brain may veer towards 4 hertz, but I'm never going to measure your brain and see that, oh, look, it's totally tuned to 4 hertz now. Like, that's not how the brain works. So it's more that you're providing suggestions,
So when you're creating your live show, do you have a vision in mind, an intention? Like, I want to give the crowd this sort of experience, and then you kind of plan it out like that. Like, I know in ecstatic dance, talking about ecstatic experiences, they program the music in such a way that there's a peak and then there's like a chill out period where you come back down. Is it like that?
Well, it's funny you say that. I mean, our music is sort of like that anyway. So without the signals, and we play ecstatic dances every once in a while, depending on who runs them. Some people in ecstatic dance have a very specific concept, like very specific, which a live band doesn't fall into. It takes like a sort of catered thing, and other people are a little looser. But we have some crossover with the ecstatic dance community, and I think that our shows typically do arc like that. We start slow, and we build, and we crescendo, and we come back down. And our music is pretty experimental. It's not like almost anything, really. And one of the things that is missing largely is structure. We play, there is some structure, but it's largely unstructured. So in electronic music, you have like the build and the drop is what everyone is thinking. So you build the tension. It's like da 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 da, boom boom, boom, and it's like this is a thing that people learn, and they expect, and the anticipation of that builds like, feelings in their body, and it creates a thing. In rock and roll, it's the same thing. You have in almost all verbally based music, there's sort of some variation of verse, verse, bridge, chorus, whatever, and our music doesn't really do that. We do build. Often though, just fade right back away after building. Like there's no drop, there's no crescendo, there's no like, boom, here's the moment. It's much more just organic waves of build and unbuild and like, up and down. And so in that sense, I think there's a crossover. And then with the brainwave entrainment, I mean, you asked, do we plan that? And so we plan set lists musically. We do think about the flow of an evening and how we want that to go, but that's almost all musically. With the signals, we're a little more creative. It's a luxury of being an artist, right? Like at the Monroe Institute, they're an institute where they're trying to provide you a consistent experience. So you come do a program, right, and that program uses the same signals every time because those are the ones that at the current time their understanding are the most effective, right? Like as a band, we've been allowed to play with things. So we often will actually tune the brainwave signals to natural phenomena. So like we
What does that
reverse
mean, natural
calculate.
phenomena?
Well, so like there's a lot of things that have frequencies. So we have a full moon signal set that we play on the full moons, where the full moon frequency is 28 and a half days or something. And, you can get the precise number, and then you can break that down in octaves, which basically just means dividing by 2 over and over and over and over until it becomes a number that is in the range of brain activity, which is somewhere between 0 and maybe 160 hertz. And then you choose a signal set based on the frequencies that are tuned to an octave of the full moon. And we've done that with solar eclipses. We've done that with the Schumann resonance, which is sort of the ambient electromagnetic pulsing frequency of our atmosphere. It's what, like when radiation comes from space and bounces between the planet and the outer atmosphere, it's that frequency. And we do look at where those numbers land and try to make sure that we're not doing anything ridiculous to your brain. But I think that that's more what we've gone with is an artistic choice than one that has any sort of science or proof behind it. We're doing it from let's see what happens if we tune to this or to that. And you do get different feelings. I find that the full moon frequencies have a slight tension to them.
I can see that.
They're a little more buzzy than some of the other ones, some of them are very calm. But yeah, so that's how, and we will sometimes work with people depending on the show. If people have numbers that are meaningful to them or something that they really want to play with, we'll just kind of go and do the math and try to come up with a signal set that matches that. On the flip side of that, normally the way that we land is that we have 3 different signals that we play at a time. Sometimes there's more, but typically we do 3. And one will be in either the sleep or deep meditation range. And one will be in sort of the relaxation range, which is kind of a bridge. So it's like more in your normal state. And one will be in gamma. So in this kind of higher thing. And the gamma is something that is, hand drumming produces a brainwave entrainment effect. Any rhythm produces a brainwave entrainment effect. And what you can't do with hand drumming, though, is get much out of the sleep range, right? Like no matter how fast you play your drums, you're unlikely to be able to play faster than about, 4 hertz, which is 4 beats a second, which is still in the sleep range in your brain. That's a very low frequency for the brain. And so, it's actually digital synthesis that's made it possible in live music to create sounds. Some of the gamma sounds that we play actually pulse at like 10,000 times per second.
Wow.
And to the ear, it's almost imperceptible. What you really hear is kind of like a purring. You hear like a because it's just going so fast. And so that's one of the cool things that modern technology has brought us is this ability to play with other states of mind. Whereas I think with traditional drumming, its purpose was and its fulfillment was that it was for trance, right? It takes you into a trance state. It brings you right down.
Yes.
And, with with synthesis, you're able to kind of stimulate different spectrums of the brain and look at states that aren't just that one kind of trance state.
Love the vibe? Join the tribe. It's free, and the link is in the show notes. See you there.
I think this is all so cool. And I can't even imagine what it's like to be in your house where this is happening all the time. I mean, people do all kinds of things, meditation, and, they do what they do to have intentional time in different spaces. So what's like the before and after like?
I mean, that is a great question. And I think that there's multiple sides to that. I mean, really, I sometimes listen to our music, and I think the signals have helped me with that, because I used to struggle a lot harder to listen to my own music. I just found it like sort of cringeworthy. I was like, okay, I don't want to hear that. I did that. That's over. And nowadays I'm able to listen to our music and actually be like, oh yeah, I like this, which is a change. And I do think some of that has to do with the signals, again, sort of disarming some of the more analytical or critical parts of your brain.
Oh, okay.
There's a flip side to that question, which is, what is it like to perform with signals playing all the time? Because when we play, we are playing also with the same signals that the audience is hearing.
Right.
And sometimes, I got to be honest, it can be very hard is not the right word. I think it's cool. I think it's unlocked a creative place for us. As a musician, sometimes I feel very lost. Like, I can get to the point on stage where I feel like, oh man, my brain is gone. I'm not thinking critically anymore. Like, so hopefully this works. And I think that, part of that has led us as musicians to a place of trust, I guess, of faith, of feeling like, our music is an offering. Mm-hmm. We have prepared, we do this. And in the moment, you just sort of have to be like, this is what's supposed to happen. Because I do feel like at times the signals are strong. I also had that when I was working with Monroe, editing it. When you're sitting there 8 hours a day, pumping this stuff into your brain, it's not always great. You can get headaches. Like, you can start to feel very spaced out because you're just being sort of held in this meditation state all day, which is not necessarily how well. And then you're also trying to be productive. I think when you go to the Monroe Institute, it's different. You have a bed, you're actually meditating often many, many hours a day, but you're being fed. All you do in between is hang out with people and talk about what you're experiencing. So it's like, it's fine. You just let go. And the farther you let go and relax, I think that often at the Monroe Institute, the more profound experiences happen a couple days into a retreat, because it takes a few days for your body to actually just achieve relaxation.
Right.
You come from this wound up tight world and you're like, okay. And then you've lied down enough and you've slept, and all you're doing is lying down and working through meditations. And at some point your body's like, I actually cannot sleep anymore. I can't tune out this meditation. I'm awake. I have all the energy. And that's when your brain really starts then being able to do deep engagement and kind of go cool places with the sound. Otherwise, I think probably the overall effect is not dissimilar to having a meditation practice.
Okay.
Okay. And I lean on it. It's in some ways it's almost a crutch. Sometimes I worry that I've become less good at meditation because I feel like if I feel stressed out, I know that I can lie down for 10 minutes and put on headphones and click a button, and I will get up and I will feel refreshed and I will feel calm. And, whereas if I took a nap, I'd probably wake up and feel groggy. And if, an actual meditation is a harder skill set. It's like you have to really force yourself. And so in a lot of ways, I think it does give you that just a really easy way to regulate bring yourself down and be like, okay, whew, there we are. Yeah. So it has, it has different effects, I think, depending on how you're engaging and, and how much of your time you spend engaging, so like
Mhm.
mixing down albums, again, that's a place where it's hard actually, because you're putting your brain in one place, but then maybe you're expected to do other stuff during the day, do some work, get the kids from school, do this and that. And like,
Yeah.
but your brain is really just in this kind of like, it's all floaty. So
So you all played Glastonbury, which I think is super cool. What is it like to do a live concert? And I think you guys mostly do outdoors as well. So how does
we,
that the nature thing
the nature thing where,
work?
yeah, we've been leaning hard towards that. I mean, we played a lot of shows this last summer, and the defining factor of what the good ones were and what the less good ones were was whether they were in buildings in cities or whether they were outside. And the outside ones were all the good ones. um, and so, we've been leaning into that. I think also it's important for people, to reconnect with nature and the planet and earth, and to get out of the urban centric kind of thinking. And so we at home tend to do outdoor shows. We played a week or two ago at a public beach. So sometimes we just do public spaces where you can set up. We've done shows. We have a little 2-acre farm that we've done shows here before, and then it hasn't really been show ready for a while. So we've been working on kind of clearing the land and the space. And in mid-December, we're going to do a show here again and try to reopen our space as an open space. And yeah, and then at Glastonbury as well. I mean, we played in the Wood, which is a super beautiful space between kind of like a couple of the bigger main stages. It's just a forest with paths through it, and they really, artists have taken the time to install lighting and cool things in the trees. And there's these two beautiful people who do willow sculptures.
Oh wow.
So they soak like willow branches, and I don't even know how to describe it. They twist them and they create both just kind of flowing linings to paths, but also there was like a fox playing a violin and some just really cool sculptures out of soaked and twisted wood. And so this year, some friends of ours set up a thing called the Humble Mushroom, which was just a little tiny bandstand style round stage in the middle of the wood. And we played there every night over Glastonbury, and it was a lot of fun. I think that festival was crazy this year. On Sunday, I think there was 350,000 people there.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so the wood and our music and the signals, I feel like it all combines to have a thing where it provides a space that's kind of necessary, where when people get burnt out on the energy of the festival, which can be super intense, depending on where you're at, like just having the really loud, really high energy music the whole time, and there was a fire on the edge of the woods. So often people would gravitate to the fire when they needed some space, and then they would kind of hear something coming from in the forest and wander in. It just ended up being a really pretty magical little space for people to come and decompress and dance, but in a much more, kind of laid back, I think, fashion.
Yeah, Glastonbury has really juicy spiritual energy of its own. So I would imagine that the energy of the place plus all of that going on would have just been incredible.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we met some great people, and I think that it is a very cool festival. I was actually surprised for the number of people there, and also some of the artists. I mean, it's not exactly an alternative festival. It's pretty mainstream, but the vibe was great. I mean, everyone was just friendly and nice and open, and I felt like, oh, this is really, it's a good thing. And you can walk right up the hill. There's a stone circle at the top of the festival grounds where you can go and sit in the stone circles. And so it's a cool, the site itself is cool, and you get in shape because it's huge. I think the festival is 900 acres this year. So just walking stage to stage
Wow.
was, I haven't walked that much in all the rest of the year.
So I've heard your music called psychedelic. If you're in that space with that many people, I imagine they're not all in the same headspace. What is that like?
What is that like? Well, I mean, so we now call our music psychoactive, which is interesting because we consider the music to be, for a while we were working with the concept of, can the music be the psychedelic, right? Can we alter the brain space with sound? However, we are not ecstatic dance, and we are not that into, what do you call it, rules. So we don't have like this is a sober space rule. We don't like promote, alcohol or drug use. We also do not prohibit it. And, we just basically are agnostic. Do what you want. And I think that, it can be pretty intense. I know that some of my peers are looking into the use of brainwave entrainment in like psychedelic therapy in combination with like ketamine therapy, which is a huge one these days. I haven't really gone there. I think that our roots as psychedelic music came from the fact that both Joe and I grew up in foundationally psychedelic scenes. She was kind of in the rave scene of London, and I was kind of in the jam band, sort of the end of the Grateful Dead, and then Fish and the whole diaspora that came from that in the US, which is a pretty psychedelically saturated environment, or was in the 90s. And so then, when we started playing music, I think that we considered it psychedelic music because our influence and our sound came from that brain space that was probably caused by taking a lot of psychedelics in our youth, and the music experience also, I think, moved both of us. Like, music was a profound part of us feeling like becoming who we are. Was what a lot of that happened at concerts and raves and live music events. So it's a little two-sided. I actually think that the combination of the Monroe sound science and psychedelics is very powerful. I'm not gonna say whether it's good or bad. I think it's all pretty ambiguous, and in fact probably has more to do with where you are in your mind than with anything else, whether things are good or bad. But it's something that we haven't had to deal too much with. I think that the most extreme example, there was once a guy at one of our shows who really sort of went very deep, very fast. I wouldn't say that he passed out, but he sat down, and then he laid down, and then he was kind of out, and it actually scared some people. To the point where they're like, "Is he okay?" And like then he was like, "I'm fine," and had to sit up and explain that he was just having a relax to a bunch of people who were totally freaking out.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm sure that there are things that people have heard about sound frequencies that are just myths. So whether it's blown up in the this is awesome kind of way, or, oh God, that's so dangerous. Can you speak to some of that? What are some of the things that you've heard that are not true?
Well, there's a lot. I used to work in alternative health. Now, I'm a believer in alternative health. There's a lot of plants that have really amazing healing properties. There are a lot of things that the FDA has not or will not approve that I think are powerful. I also think that it is an industry rife with fraud and liars and people who will say, snake oil salesman. Because suddenly, if you're getting away from scientific proof, oh, I can absolutely show you that this medicine cures this, and you're getting into this plant has these properties which could connect to this, right? All of a sudden, you can be like, here, eat some sand. I'm pretty sure that will cure your cancer, and it's only $50. And so you get a very broad spectrum of people who, also of people with levels of expertise, people who actually have studied plants and plant medicine and the biochemistry of that for their lives and have a deep comprehension. and people who just think that, oh, well, let's take some like eucalyptus and make an essential oil because we can sell that for like $50 a vial and say it has these magical properties. Right? Capitalism is a corrupter. And I think the same thing has happened in sound, where it's almost partially because sound has started to be discussed in a crossover way with healing.
Yeah.
And health is a great market, because when you are unhealthy, you're scared and you're willing to spend money to get healthy again. Whereas like when you're bored, you might be willing to buy an album and listen to a new artist and like listen to music. It's a way harder sales proposition, right? Trying to get people to buy music or to get into your music is way harder than saying, oh, if you're stressed out, I will play you this sound and it will make you relaxed, right? Suddenly that is a modality. It's a packageable thing. And anytime you get there, then there are people who will, there's a company in the Ukraine that cranks out unprecedented amounts of binaural beat meditations on Spotify. I mean, they must have hundreds of thousands of hours of meditation music. It's absolute rubbish. And they're not thinking about the signals. They're not thinking about anything. They just know that they can say binaural music and they're making money off streams, right? So I think that there's a level of trust there. There's also quite a few other things happening. So there's some confusion around frequency. There's two types of frequency. There's a beat frequency. A frequency is how often something happens, right? And so a beat frequency is how often is the beat? Boom, 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 so let's pretend that that's 1 beat per second, right? That would be 1 hertz. Like that's a frequency of a beat. That is how brainwave entrainment works. So then there's musical frequency, which is tonal frequency. And that's when you hear a thing that's a pure tone, like, whoa. And that sound is a wave. And so a tonal frequency is how far apart the peaks of the wave that create that tone are. It has no brainwave entrainment effects whatsoever. Your brain works in beats. So then you have things like the solfeggio frequencies, which are called ancient frequencies, but were invented by a guy in the 70s, just totally made up, have no evidence behind them. He wrote a book, he made some stuff up, he said the word ancient, and now there's people who really believe that. I mean, there's people who are still proponents of it and don't care that it has no foundation in, anything. And I think that I like to walk the line. I feel like you have to be a little careful, because I also believe in magic and I believe in the unknown. So just because science hasn't proven that the solfeggio frequencies at their specific things, and, assuming also that they came from somewhere a little more real than where they did come from, but even if not, if somebody's like, hey, every time I listen to this tone, I feel this way. Okay. I can't say there's not a real thing happening until I've taken the time to actually study it and prove that there's not a real thing happening. We don't know. And, and so I think that it's a pretty hot mess, but there are things with more evidence, like brainwave entrainment, where I can really show you that if I do this, I can show you EEG of your brain and we can see that your brain's doing a thing. And then we have anecdotal evidence of how you feel when your brain does the thing. I can't actually prove, nobody has proved, as far as I'm aware, that when X happens in your brain, you always have Y happen in your consciousness, because there's a lot more variables to that. There's how you're feeling. There's whether you drank coffee. There's how much sleep you got. There's the environment you're in and how comfortable you are. All of those things impact how signals in your brain. And this is something at the Monroe Institute. It's very clear. We do a thing called Discovery, where you hook up 16 people to EEG, and you actually have monitors monitoring 3 people at a table and watching brainwaves in real time as we go through exercises. And you can play one exercise and walk around the room and no 2 brains are doing the same thing. It is all over the board. And so I think it's a fine line. And in a lot of ways, people need to do the research and kind of be able to have trust. I have a site at sentiosonics.com, which is a word that I made up, which is sort of about the relationship between human sentience, which is what it is to be, and sound. And I try there to document what is known and what is, yeah, mostly what's known, so that there is some record of like, yes, this is true. No, this is clearly not. And this is a gray area, you know? So like with tonal frequencies and people saying this is the frequency of the heart or this is the frequency of your crown chakra, I mean, it's very abstract. Where did those numbers come from? It's the same way that we do with our band. This is the frequency of the full moon. Like, no, it's not. It's like someone in India once said that this chakra is yellow and colors have a frequency. So let's look at that color and then let's relate that to sound. And then let's relate that to the brain. You're making so many jumps to get to like, this is the frequency of that chakra in sound. That is it or not has, who knows? There's no real way to tell that. I guess that's the thing. And I think that one thing, I have to be careful. Here I work at the Monroe Institute, so we sell sound as a healing modality. But I would say that one thing you need to be careful of is people that sell sound as a healing modality, and make sure that you're thinking through what their claims are. And one of the reasons I love the Monroe Institute is because they are on the farthest edge of woo-woo. They talk about channeling and past lives and reincarnation and, all sorts of things that are very far out, and they approach it from the most practical, on the ground, open-minded, scientific exploration, right? Like, well, this guy has this story, this guy has this story. We're exploring this thing. It's very clear and logical path, more than I think sometimes you can get the people who are just like, and I think also part of that, there's a whole little, which also relates to money often, like kind of the guru complex. Yeah. Oh, if you come to me, I have the sound that's going to heal your brain. And, I think that, that kind of messaging always puts my shackles up a little, where I just feel like,
me too.
Is it?
For sure.
So,
well, I would love to see you. What do you guys have coming up? What shows?
That is a great question. We've been moving some things around. And so right now, we basically plan to spend the winter at home. So we're in Puerto Rico, and we have a show here on our farm in mid-December. We have a show on another farm up in the mountains in January. I think we might do a New Year's show. We're looking at possibly doing that at a public beach, kind of a free and open show on New Year's. And then we're looking towards probably next spring or summer before we actually hit the road and tour again. And so we haven't put those dates together yet. We're still sort of unwinding from this last summer where we were on the road for 2 months straight. And, I will say though, out loud to anyone, we love to come and play for people. And if anyone on the world who thinks that they can put, about 100 people in a room and pay for just the cost of us getting there and back, we're willing to discuss what that looks like. And that's I think our best bet, and some of our favorite places to play. I don't know if house party is the right word, but are places where it's often farms, where you've got enough open space, depending, because real nature shows are hard. You either have to have a generator or batteries of pretty significant power, so being somewhere where you can run electricity for a sound system is helpful. But those are kind of our parameters, and we love just, kind of exploring. Our favorite show over the summer was at a place in Totnes in England. It was at someone's land, which you couldn't even drive to. It was a 15-minute walk out into the woods. So you had to park in a town and then walk, down this path in the woods to find this little magical piece of land. And I think that that's for us where it's at. I think that also the other thing that is a big driver for us is the people and the community and the vibe, which is one of the reasons why we don't play bars, because you have no control over that. You're just showing up. Anybody can show up and they can like you or not. And, and our music's pretty weird for that too. We're not playing 70s covers. So it's not just a comfortable background thing. You have to think, do I like this or not? And so, yeah, we've found that that's kind of our our best sauce is finding where communities exist, finding somebody that's got land where that community exists, and then going and bringing the people together and playing.
I love what you're doing, and I thank you so much for coming on to share it with us. So I will post your links in the show notes so people can check it out for themselves. And I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks. One other thing I will say is that right now, last week we released the first day. Today we released the second day, and over the next 2 weeks, we're releasing day 3 and 4 of the live sets from Glastonbury.
Cool.
So I don't know how far in the future your shows come out, but those will be out in the next couple of weeks and available for listening. So to get a sense of what it's like live.
And does the music have the same effect as from a recording as it does live?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. The signals are all recorded on the live stuff, and it is
very cool. Well, I will definitely check that out.
Yeah, it's a subtle effect. It's worth checking out. It's worth playing in your normal life and seeing how that feels. It's also worth, if you're explorative, taking the time to throw on headphones and lie down and actually like let yourself go deep with it, because it does create kind of two different impacts that way. I think that it's, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you.